Hey, everyone. This is going to be a long post, so buckle up. I never thought I'd be sharing something like this, but I guess life has a way of surprising you in the worst possible ways. I'm a 47-year-old man, and I've been married to my wife, Emily, for 20 years. At least, I thought we had a solid marriage, until recently. A bit of background first. Emily and I met in college, and we dated for a little over 2 years before we tied the knot. She was the life of the party, always the center of attention with her fiery personality and infectious laugh. I fell hard for her, and honestly, I thought I hit the jackpot. She was smart, funny, gorgeous, everything I thought I wanted in a wife. We spent those 2 years building a strong foundation, really getting to know each other before making the big commitment. When we finally did get married, I thought we were ready for anything. For the most part, things were great. We built a life together, raised 2 amazing kids, and bought a house in the suburbs. To the outside world, we were the perfect couple. Even to me, for a long time, it felt like we were. But then something started to shift. It began with small things that were easy to overlook at first. Emily started going out more often, saying she needed girl time with her friends. At first, it was maybe once a month, then once a week. She'd dress up more than usual, heels, makeup, the whole 9 yards, even if it was just for drinks with the girls. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, who was I to stop her from having a life outside of our marriage? But then she started staying out later and later. At first, it was 11 or midnight, which seemed reasonable enough. Then it turned into 2 or 3 a.m. on a regular basis. Her explanations were vague, like, "Sorry, babe, we lost track of time," or "I stayed at Sarah's because I couldn't drive home." And she wouldn't text me much while she was out, which wasn't like her. The Emily I married used to send me little updates just to check in. Now, she'd go hours without a word. When she came home, it was like she wasn't even really there. She'd crash right away and barely acknowledge me. I started asking her where she was going and who she was with, but whenever I brought it up, she'd get defensive. "Why are you acting so paranoid?" she'd snap. "I'm just going out with my friends. Can't I have a life without you interrogating me?" I told myself maybe I was being paranoid. After all, we'd been together for so long. 20 years of marriage. And before that, we spent years dating and building this life together. Why would she suddenly throw it all away? But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The late nights, the secrecy, and the way she started to emotionally distance herself. It all felt off. I just didn't know how far off it really was. It was a Wednesday afternoon, one of those normal, uneventful days. I was in the middle of wrapping up some work at home when my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number, and for a second, I almost didn't pick up. But something made me answer. "Hello," I said, distracted, expecting it to be a telemarketer or wrong number. There was a pause on the other end before a woman's voice came through, quiet and almost hesitant. Is this Daniel?" "Yeah, who's this?" Another pause. "You don't know me, but I need to talk to you about something important. It's about your wife." Immediately, my heart dropped into my stomach. "Who is this?" I asked again, sharper this time. "My name's Lisa," she said, her voice trembling a little. I don't know how to say this, but I think my husband is having an affair with your wife. I've been sitting with this for a while, trying to figure out if I should call you. I'm really sorry." For a second, I just sat there completely numb. My brain couldn't process what she was saying. This couldn't be real. "You've got the wrong person," I said, my voice flat, almost mechanical. "I wish I did," Lisa replied. "Believe me, I know how crazy this sounds. I wouldn't be calling you if I wasn't sure." There was a lump forming in my throat, but I pushed it down. "What are you talking about? Why would you think that?" She took a deep breath. "I found messages between my husband, Kyle, and your wife, Emily. They've been meeting up for months. I know this is a shock, but I thought you deserved to know." "Kyle." I froze. That name. I knew it vaguely. Emily had mentioned to Kyle once or twice, but always in passing, like he was just some colleague or acquaintance. I had no reason to think anything of it. Until now. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to believe it. I couldn't. "I'm sorry," Lisa said again, her voice breaking. "I know this is a lot to take in. I found out a few weeks ago. At first, I wasn't sure if I should even contact you, but I felt like I had to. No one deserves to be kept in the dark about something like this. I didn't say anything for what felt like a lifetime. The walls of my office seemed to close in on me as I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles turning white. I felt like I was suffocating. Lisa continued, I have proof if you need it. I didn't want to just throw this at you without having anything solid, but if you want to meet up, I can show you the messages. Pictures, dates, all of it. I felt dizzy, like the ground was shifting beneath me. Yeah, I muttered, barely hearing my own voice. Yeah, I think I need to see that. We arranged to meet later that week, and I hung up the phone, my heart pounding in my chest. My entire body felt like it had been hit by a truck. Emily was cheating. She'd been lying to me for months, maybe longer, and I had been completely oblivious. I sat there in silence, staring at the phone in my hand, trying to figure out what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, but another part of me wasn't ready. I needed to see the proof. I needed to know exactly how deep this betrayal went before I made any moves. Emily was still out of the house, probably doing God knows what, or more accurately, who. I didn't even know where to begin processing this. How do you deal with the realization that the person you've spent 2 decades of your life with has been betraying you behind your back? I looked around our house, at the framed family photos on the walls, the remnants of a life I thought we shared. None of it felt real anymore. Everything suddenly seemed like a lie. But one thing was for sure. I wasn't going to tell our daughter, Anna. Not yet. She didn't need to be dragged into this nightmare. At least, not until I had the full story. For now, I would wait for my meeting with Lisa, and then I'd figure out my next move. I barely slept in the days leading up to my meeting with Lisa. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Emily with this other man, Kyle. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together all the moments that had seemed off in the last few months. The late nights, the defensiveness, the sudden changes in behavior, it all started making sense now. By the time Friday rolled around, I was running on fumes, but I needed to see the proof. I needed to know if this was real or if my mind was just playing tricks on me. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop a couple of towns over, far enough that neither Emily nor Kyle would randomly walk in on us. I showed up early, sitting in a corner booth with a black coffee in front of me, staring blankly out the window. I still didn't know what to expect or how I'd feel when I finally saw the proof Lisa mentioned. When Lisa walked in, I recognized her immediately from the photos she'd texted me. She looked nervous, just as tired as I felt, with dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept much either. I couldn't blame her. Her life had probably been turned upside down, just as much as mine. "Daniel?" she asked, her voice hesitant as she approached my booth. I nodded, standing up to shake her hand. "Yeah, you must be Lisa." She sat down across from me, clutching her purse like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "I'm really sorry about all this," she said quietly, not quite meeting my eyes. I shook my head. "You don't need to apologize. I appreciate you telling me the truth." We sat in awkward silence for a moment before she pulled her phone out of her bag. "I brought the messages," she said, scrolling through her screen. "I'm sorry again, but you deserve to know." She handed the phone to me, and my stomach twisted as I started reading. It was all there. The texts between Emily and Kyle were explicit. They talked about meeting up at hotels, sneaking away during work hours. All of it. There were dates and times, messages about how Kyle's wife didn't suspect anything, how Emily had told me she was out with friends or working late. My hands shook as I scrolled through the messages. I felt nauseous, like I might throw up right there in the middle of the coffee shop. This wasn't just a fling. This had been going on for months, maybe longer. "I'm so sorry," Lisa said again, her voice breaking. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to believe it at first either." I pushed the phone back across the table and leaned back, trying to catch my breath. "How did you find out?" I asked, needing to know more. Lisa looked down at her coffee, stirring it absently. "I found some messages a few weeks ago. He was acting distant, like he was always distracted. One night, I saw his phone light up when he thought I was asleep. The message was from someone named Emily. At first, I thought maybe it was work-related, but when I saw the content of the texts, I knew." She swallowed hard, her voice shaky. I confronted him about it. He denied it at first, but eventually he admitted it. Said it had been going on for months. I couldn't believe it. I mean, we've been married for 12 years. We have kids together, and I thought, she trailed off, wiping at her eyes. Anyway, I found your name on her Facebook profile. That's how I found you. I just sat there trying to process everything. My wife, the woman I had trusted for 2 decades, was sneaking around with another man, and this wasn't some random fling. This was a full-blown affair, with dates, plans, and lies so intricate I couldn't believe I hadn't seen it sooner. I don't even know what to say, I muttered, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. Lisa nodded, her expression sympathetic. I know exactly how you feel. I've been in the same place for weeks. You want to scream, to confront them, but then you also want to make sure you have control of the situation. I don't know what your plans are, but if you need anything, proof, more details, I'm here. I sat there for a moment, taking in her words. There was part of me that wanted to rush home and blow up Emily's world, confront her with everything I had learned. But Lisa was right. I needed to be smart about this. You've got kids, right? Lisa asked gently. Yeah, I nodded. A daughter. She's a senior in high school. Lisa winced. That's tough. I haven't told my kids anything yet either. It's complicated. It was more than complicated. The thought of telling Anna that her mother was a liar, a cheater, it made my stomach churn. I wasn't ready to break her world apart just yet. Not until I had figured out exactly what I was going to do. I'm not going to say anything to her. Not yet. I said quietly, more to myself than to Lisa. I need to figure this out first. Lisa nodded, understanding in her eyes. Take your time. Don't rush it. You deserve to process this. We sat there for a few more minutes, talking quietly, going over the details of how long the affair had been going on, how Emily and Colette met. It felt surreal, like I was talking about someone else's life, not my own. By the time I left the coffee shop, I had a decision to make. I could keep playing along, pretending everything was normal, or I could confront Emily head-on and watch our entire life unravel. Either way, nothing would ever be the same again. After meeting with Lisa, everything felt like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. The proof was there. Emily's betrayal laid out in black and white. But even with all the evidence in front of me, there was a part of me that still hadn't fully accepted it. Maybe it's because after 20 years of marriage, it's hard to believe the person you build a life with could do something so devastating. I went home that evening trying to act normal, but inside I was seething. I didn't confront Emily, not yet. I still needed to see it for myself. I wanted to catch her in the act. I didn't know why. It wasn't like I didn't already know the truth, but I needed to see it with my own eyes. Maybe then, I'd have the closure I needed to decide what to do next. A few days passed, and Emily was back to her usual routine, distant, secretive, spending more time out of the house than in it. On Saturday, she told me she had to run a few errands and would be gone for most of the afternoon. Something in her tone was off. It was casual, like nothing was wrong, but I had heard this excuse too many times before. This time, I wasn't going to let it slide. As soon as she left, I grabbed my keys and followed her. I know what you're thinking. Stalking your own wife? But after everything I'd learned, I felt like I had no other choice. I needed to know where she was going, and I needed to catch her in her lies. My heart was pounding in my chest as I kept a safe distance behind her car. She wasn't heading to the grocery store or anywhere near where she usually ran errands. No, she was driving toward a part of town I didn't recognize. Eventually, she pulled into a parking lot, some rundown motel just off the highway. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly I thought I might break it. I parked a few spots back, watching her as she got out of the car and headed straight for one of the rooms. She didn't even hesitate, like she knew exactly where she was going. I sat there for a few minutes, my head spinning. This was it. This was the moment I'd see the truth with my own eyes. But even though I had spent days preparing for this, nothing could have really prepared me. My heart raced, and every instinct in me was telling me to get out of the car and confront her right then and there. But I didn't move. Not yet. I needed to know for sure. After what felt like an eternity, I got out of the car and walked toward the motel. I felt sick to my stomach as I made my way to the room Emily had disappeared into. When I got close, I could hear faint voices from inside. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to move closer, standing just outside the door. It wasn't locked. The door was slightly ajar, like they weren't even trying to hide. I pushed it open just enough to see into the room, and that's when I saw them. There she was, Emily, sitting on the bed with him, Kyle. His back was to me, but I could see everything I needed to see. They were laughing together, leaning in close, talking like they didn't have a care in the world. My heart pounded so loudly I thought they might hear it. I was frozen, standing in the doorway, watching as Emily leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't some quick, meaningless kiss either. It was the kind of kiss that made it painfully clear this wasn't the first time. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This wasn't just a fling. It wasn't just some mistake. This was real, and I was seeing it with my own eyes. I wanted to burst into the room, to scream at them, to tear the whole place apart. But something held me back. Maybe it was the shock, or maybe it was the realization that this moment, this awful, soul-crushing moment, was going to change my life forever. There was no going back after this. I backed away slowly, slipping out of the motel without making a sound. My hands were trembling as I got back into the car, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't control. I had seen it. The betrayal was real, and there was no more denying it. But just as I was about to pull out of the parking lot, something else happened, something I hadn't expected. As I sat there, trying to process what I had just witnessed, another car pulled into the lot. I barely noticed it at first, but then I saw who was driving. It was Lisa. She got out of the car, looking around nervously before walking toward the same room I had just left. My heart skipped a beat as I realized what was happening. Lisa was about to catch them too. I watched in silence as she approached the door, her face hardening as she pushed it open. For a brief second, I considered jumping out of the car, stopping her from seeing what I had just seen. But I didn't. I couldn't. The door slammed behind her, and I could hear shouting from inside the room. Emily and Kyle must have been caught completely off guard. Lisa's voice was shaking with rage, and I could barely make out what she was saying through the walls. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was going on. This was it. This was the moment everything was going to explode, and I was sitting right there, watching it all unfold. I sat in my car, my heart pounding in my chest as I listened to the muffled shouting from inside the motel room. Lisa had stormed in, and I could only imagine the chaos unfolding between her, Kyle, and Emily. I felt frozen in place, unsure of what to do next. Should I go in and confront them? Should I just drive away? My mind was racing, and then the shouting stopped. Suddenly, the door flew open, and Lisa stormed out, her face red with rage, tears streaming down her cheeks. She didn't even look at me as she rushed past, heading back to her car. I didn't blame her. Seeing your husband like that, with another woman, it tears you apart. I knew exactly how she felt. But then something else happened, something I never could have imagined. Kyle came out of the room a few moments later, looking shaken, like he had just been through a war zone. He was buttoning up his shirt, his face pale as he glanced around the parking lot. But instead of running after Lisa, he stood there for a moment, staring down at his phone. I watched as he hesitated, then started dialing a number. I was ready to leave, to put the whole nightmare behind me. But just as I was about to drive away, my own phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced down at the screen, and my blood ran cold. It was a text from Emily. "We need to talk. I know everything." For a second, I couldn't breathe. What did she mean she knew everything? She couldn't possibly know that I had been following her, that I had seen her with Kyle. Did she realize I had just witnessed the affair? I looked back toward the motel room, my mind spinning, and that's when I saw it. Emily standing in the doorway, watching me. Her expression wasn't one of guilt or fear. She wasn't shocked to see me there. No, she looked almost calm. She started walking toward my car, and that's when it hit me. She knew I was here the whole time. This wasn't some accidental discovery. She had set me up. My heart raced as I pieced it together in a split second. The way she had been acting, the strange text, the fact that she wasn't panicked when Lisa walked in. It all made sense now. And then the real shock hit me. As Emily approached my car, she didn't look like someone who had been caught in the act of an affair. She looked like someone who was about to tell me something far worse. When she finally reached the window, she leaned down, her voice low and calm. "I've known about you and Lisa." My entire body went cold. The words didn't make sense at first. Me and Lisa? I stammered. What are you talking about? She smiled, this eerie, knowing smile. Don't act like you didn't know. I've known for months. I stared at her, completely speechless. What are you talking about? I'm not involved with Lisa. Emily straightened up, crossing her arms as she looked down at me with a kind of smug satisfaction. Oh, but you are. You've been playing detective, trying to catch me in an affair, but the truth is, I already knew. I've known about you and Lisa since the beginning. I was in total shock. My head was spinning. What the hell are you talking about? I haven't touched Lisa. She let out a laugh, almost mocking. No, but Lisa and I planned this. We've been talking for weeks, setting this up, watching you unravel. You're not as clever as you think. The air seemed to drain from the car. My heart pounded as the truth began to sink in. Lisa and Emily had been working together this whole time. This wasn't just about the affair. This was something else. Something darker. And then she said the words that would change everything. We wanted you to catch us. You were always so predictable, so easy to manipulate. Do you really think I'd be that careless with my phone? Or let you follow me without noticing? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My wife and her supposed rival, Lisa, had been conspiring against me from the start. All the evidence, the messages, the motel, it had all been part of their plan. A setup. And now, I was the fool, sitting in my car with no idea what to do next. You're going to want to keep quiet about all of this, she added, her tone turning cold. Because if you don't, Lisa and I will make sure you lose everything. I was frozen in place, the weight of her words sinking in. My mind was racing, trying to process what she had just told me. This wasn't about love or lust or even betrayal. This was about control. Emily had played me like a puppet, and now she was holding all the strings. I sat there in stunned silence, my heart pounding as Emily's words echoed in my head. She had planned this. All of it. The affair, the text, the motel, it was all a setup. I'd been played. My own wife and Lisa had been pulling the strings, watching me stumble into their trap like some kind of fool. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. The anger that had been building inside me for days was now mixed with a kind of shock I didn't know how to process. What was their endgame? Why would they do this to me? Emily stood there, arms crossed, her smug smile unwavering as she watched the realization sink in. You don't get it, do you? She said, her voice calm, almost amused. You've been so focused on catching me, you didn't even see what was right in front of you. Why? I finally managed to choke out. Why are you doing this? She shrugged, that same cold smile still on her face. Why? Because I can. Because I was tired of being the good wife while you ran around pretending to be the perfect husband. The accusation hit me like a slap to the face. Pretending? I've never cheated on you, Emily. I've been faithful to you for 20 years. Oh, I know you haven't physically cheated, she replied, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. But emotionally? That's another story. You think I didn't notice how distant you've been? How you've pulled away from me, spending more time with your work, your friends, your hobbies? Anything but me. It was only a matter of time before one of us snapped. I just happened to be the one who took control first. I felt sick. This wasn't the Emily I thought I knew. She sounded ruthless. Like everything I thought we'd built over the years had been nothing more than a game to her. And Lisa? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. What does she get out of this? Why would she help you? Emily laughed softly, shaking her head. Poor Lisa. She's just as desperate as I am. Her marriage has been a mess for years. Kyle's had more affairs than she can count, and she's been stuck, too afraid to leave. So, when we started talking, we realized we had something in common. We both needed out, and we both needed leverage. What better way to get what we want than to set up the men who think they're in control? I clenched my fists, my anger building with every word she said. Leverage? What kind of leverage are you talking about? Emily leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. The kind that destroys everything if you don't cooperate. I stared at her, my mind spinning. What the hell did she mean by that? She must have seen the confusion on my face because she sighed, like she was explaining something simple to a child. I have everything I need to ruin you, Daniel. Photos, texts, financial records. It's all ready to go. If you try to fight me, if you try to expose what I've done, I'll make sure you lose everything. The house, the money, our daughter, you'll walk away with nothing. And trust me, Lisa's got just as much on Kyle. We both walk away clean, and you too. Well, you don't. My blood ran cold. She was serious. This wasn't just about an affair. Emily had been planning this for a long time, building a case against me, knowing exactly how to pull the rug out from under me if I ever caught on. I sat back in my seat, trying to process everything. Emily was playing a game I never even knew I was a part of. The betrayal, the lies, the manipulation, it was all for control. She wasn't just having an affair. She was trying to destroy me, and she had all the pieces in place to do it. But something inside me shifted at that moment. Maybe it was the shock wearing off, or maybe it was the realization that I wasn't going to let her win. Not like this. Not after everything I'd been through. If she wanted to play dirty, I could do the same. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. So, what happens now? I asked, keeping my voice as steady as I could. Emily tilted her head, as if she hadn't expected me to be so composed. What happens now is simple. You keep quiet. We go about our lives, and when the time is right, we'll get divorced. Clean, simple. You don't drag this out, and I won't ruin you. And if I don't agree? She smiled again, that same cold, calculating smile. If you don't agree, Daniel, you'll wish you had. With that, she turned and walked back toward her car, leaving me sitting there, staring after her, my mind racing. She thought she had me cornered. She thought she'd won. But as I sat there, watching her drive away, I realized something. Emily may have thought she was in control, but she had underestimated me. If she wanted to fight, she was going to get one. But it wasn't going to play out the way she expected. I had my own leverage, my own plans. And while she thought she had everything covered, she didn't know the lengths I was willing to go to protect myself and my daughter from the mess she had created. The storm was coming, and I was ready for it. As Emily's car disappeared down the road, my mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. She thought she had me pinned, that I would sit back and accept her terms while she destroyed everything I cared about. But she was wrong. I wasn't about to let her walk all over me. Not after what she'd done. I spent the rest of that day thinking through every move, every step I needed to take to ensure that when the dust settled, I'd be the one left standing, not her. Emily had laid out her plans, her leverage, but she had underestimated one crucial thing. I knew her better than she realized. And while she thought she had control, I knew exactly how to dismantle it. The first step was securing my assets. She may have hinted at financial records and threats to drain me dry, but I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. The next morning, I called our lawyer, the same one we had used for years. I requested an urgent meeting and kept my explanations brief. I didn't give him all the details, just enough to make it clear that I needed to move our shared assets into accounts she couldn't touch. As I suspected, Emily hadn't made her move yet. The lawyer helped me transfer half of our joint accounts into a secure personal account, and I made sure to lock down my investments, property titles, and anything else Emily might try to claim. By the time I walked out of his office, I felt a small victory in my hands. That was step one. She wouldn't see it coming. Step two was more personal. If Emily was playing the long game, building her case to make me look like the bad guy, I needed to discredit her first. I thought about her affair with Kyle and how she and Lisa had been working together, plotting behind my back. If I could get proof, real proof that went beyond what Lisa had shown me, I could blow her entire scheme apart. That's where Tyler came in. He was my best friend from college, and by sheer luck, he was a private investigator now. I called him up, and after explaining what had been going on, he agreed to help. I didn't need to convince him. He was already furious on my behalf. "Don't worry, man," Tyler said on the phone. "I'll get everything you need. If she's meeting up with this guy, I'll have pictures, locations, timestamps, you name it." With Tyler on the case, I felt a sense of control I hadn't had in weeks. Emily had been sneaking around, thinking she was untouchable, but I was about to expose her for exactly what she was. And once I had what I needed, I'd use it to destroy the false narrative she had built. The third step was more subtle, but maybe the most important. Anna, our daughter. I had been holding off on telling her anything because I didn't want to drag her into this mess before I was ready. But now, I knew it was time to prepare her. I couldn't tell her everything just yet, but I could start laying the groundwork for what was to come. That night, I sat her down for dinner and made sure to keep things calm, measured. I didn't want to panic her. "Anna, I started. You know how your mom has been acting a little different lately? She looked up at me, frowning slightly. Yeah, I've noticed she's been out a lot. I nodded. I just want you to know that no matter what happens, I'm always here for you. Some things might change soon, but it won't change how much I love you. Anna's eyes narrowed, and I could see she was starting to put pieces together, even if she didn't fully understand yet. Is something going on with you and Mom? I sighed. We've been having some problems, yeah. I'm not going to lie to you, but we'll get through it. Just know that whatever happens, I'll make sure you're taken care of. Both of us will. She nodded, clearly uneasy but trusting me. I didn't go into any more detail than that. I couldn't, not yet. But it was enough to start preparing her for what was to come. Over the next few days, Tyler worked quickly. He followed Emily, tracked her movements, and, just as I had expected, she met up with Kyle again. Tyler got the photos I needed, clear shots of them going into hotels, laughing together, even kissing. He compiled everything into a neat little folder, and when I looked through the pictures, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. But I didn't confront her right away. That wasn't the plan. Instead, I bided my time, letting her think everything was going according to her scheme. And then came the perfect opportunity, an anniversary party for Emily's parents. It was a huge gathering, with all her family and friends in attendance. Emily, ever the social butterfly, was excited for it, planning the event for weeks. She had no idea that I had my own plans for that night. When the night of the party arrived, I was ready. I had the folder with Tyler's pictures tucked away, my lawyer on standby, and a plan to reveal everything in the most public way possible. It was time to expose her for what she was. Emily looked radiant that night, all smiles as she greeted guests, acting like the perfect wife. I played along, pretending nothing was wrong, but inside I was counting down the minutes. When everyone was finally seated for dinner, I stood up, raising my glass for a toast. Thank you all for being here tonight. I began, smiling as I scanned the room. It's been a wonderful evening, celebrating a wonderful family. Emily beamed at me from across the room, completely unaware of what was coming. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me as I continued. I've always admired how this family has been built on trust, on loyalty, on love. And I think it's important to recognize those values tonight. There was a pause, and then I reached for the folder. I could feel Emily's eyes on me, but she still didn't suspect anything. But sometimes, I continued, my voice growing colder, that trust gets broken. Sometimes the people we think we know aren't who they seem to be. I opened the folder, pulling out the pictures, and held them up for everyone to see. The room fell silent as people leaned in, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. This is Emily, I said calmly, pointing to the photos of her and Kyle. And this is what she's been doing behind my back for months. Gasps filled the room. Emily's face drained of color as she realized what was happening. Her smile faded, replaced by pure shock. This, I said, my voice steady, is what betrayal looks like. I could see the panic in her eyes, the way her world was starting to crumble. She tried to speak, to explain, but I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses. I've already spoken to my lawyer, I added. The divorce papers are ready. I'll be taking full custody of Anna, and you'll be lucky if you walk away with anything. Emily stood there, frozen, as the weight of her actions came crashing down around her. The room was filled with whispers, her family and friends staring at her in disbelief. I turned to leave, not bothering to look back at the wreckage I had just unleashed. I had everything I needed, and for the first time in weeks, I felt in control. For a moment, the room was deathly silent. The shock on everyone's faces hung in the air like a weight that couldn't be ignored. Emily stood frozen, her face pale, her hands trembling at her sides. The photos in my hand were like a dagger I had driven right into her heart, right in front of her friends, her family, her parents. And she knew there was no coming back from this. I watched her, waiting for her to speak, to say something, anything, to try and explain away what she had done. But no words came. She just stood there, eyes wide, her mouth slightly open as if trying to force some excuse that even she couldn't believe. There were whispers from the guests, shocked glances exchanged, but all I could focus on was her. Emily, the woman I had spent 2 decades with, exposed for the liar she was. You don't understand, she stammered finally, her voice shaking. It's not what it looks like. A part of me almost laughed at the cliché, the desperation in her voice, the pitiful attempt to salvage her dignity. But I wasn't here to argue. The proof was there in black and white, and everyone in that room could see it for themselves. It's exactly what it looks like, I said coldly, my voice steady, no longer filled with the rage I'd been carrying for weeks. You thought you could lie to me, to everyone, and get away with it. But now they all know. Your parents, your friends, everyone knows who you really are. Her eyes darted around the room, desperate for support, but no one spoke up. Even her parents, who had always loved me like their own son, sat there in stunned silence. Her father, a stern man who rarely showed emotion, looked at her with a mix of disbelief and disappointment. Her mother was quietly sobbing, unable to process what her daughter had done. Emily took a step forward, her voice pleading. Daniel, please, this doesn't have to end like this. We can fix this. We can work through it. I stared at her, my chest tightening with a mixture of anger and pity. I could see it in her eyes. The panic, the realization that her carefully constructed plan was falling apart. But it was too late. She had made her choices, and there was no fixing what she had done. There's nothing to fix, Emily, I replied, my voice cold and final. You destroyed our marriage. You lied to me, manipulated me, and conspired to ruin my life. This is the end. The tears finally came. Emily broke down, sobbing, her carefully composed exterior crumbling in front of everyone. She was always so strong, so in control, but now she was nothing more than a woman whose world was collapsing around her. I loved you, I said, my voice soft but firm. I trusted you, and you threw it all away. Without another word, I turned my back on her. I could hear the murmurs of the guests behind me, could feel the weight of their judgment in the air. But I didn't care. I had done what needed to be done. Emily was left standing alone in the wreckage of the life she had destroyed. As I walked out of the room, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The truth was out, and there was no undoing it. The divorce was already in motion, and there was no saving what was left of our marriage. The months that followed were chaotic, to say the least. The divorce was swift and brutal. Emily tried to fight, tried to claim that she had been wronged, that I was the one who had betrayed her, but no one believed her. The evidence was too overwhelming, the damage too deep. With the photos, the financial records, and Tyler's help, my case was airtight. I filed for full custody of our daughter, Anna, and to my surprise, Emily didn't put up much of a fight. Maybe she realized that her chances of winning were slim. Maybe she was too ashamed to keep fighting after everything I had exposed. Either way, Anna stayed with me, and our bond grew stronger as we navigated life without Emily. Anna took it hard at first. She didn't know the full details, at least not at the beginning. I spared her from the worst of it, only telling her what she needed to know. But as time went on, she learned more from the whispers, from the gossip that spread through our social circles. Eventually, she came to me, asking for the truth. I told her, not everything, but enough. Enough for her to understand that her mother wasn't the woman she thought she was. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of tears, but we got through it together. Emily moved out of our house shortly after the divorce was finalized. She ended up with a small apartment on the other side of town, far away from the life we had built together. We didn't speak much after that. She tried to reach out a few times, but I wasn't interested in reopening old wounds. The woman I had loved for 20 years was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize anymore. As for Kyle and Lisa, well, that situation didn't last long either. After Lisa exposed Kyle's affair to their friends and family, their marriage quickly fell apart. Lisa got the upper hand in the divorce, taking most of what Kyle had. The last I heard, Kyle was living in some dingy apartment, far removed from the life of luxury he had once enjoyed. And me? I moved on, slowly but surely. I threw myself into my work, focused on rebuilding the pieces of my life that Emily had shattered. I spent more time with Anna, taking her on trips, helping her prepare for college, making sure she knew that despite everything, I would always be there for her. There were hard days, of course, Days when the anger and betrayal still gnawed at me. But as time passed, the wounds healed, and I found peace in the new life I was building. Emily's name came up less and less as the years went by. Our marriage had been a chapter in my life, but it wasn't the whole story. I had survived the worst of it, and now I was moving forward, stronger, smarter, and free from the lies that had once held me down. If I had learned anything from this nightmare, it was that betrayal doesn't define you. It breaks you, yes, but it also forces you to rebuild, to find the strength you never knew you had. And in the end, that's exactly what I did.